Good evening, everybody. I'm Jerry Willis. We start tonight with a Fox Business exclusive. The foreclosure fiasco hit a fevered pitch today, with all 50 states announcing a joint investigation into the banks and their shoddy paperwork. Our lead guests tonight were able to interview people at the center of the controversy, the so-called robo-signers. Foreclosure attorneys Peter Ticktin and Josh Blyle. They join me live now from Fort Lauderdale. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I just want our audience to be familiar with you guys. You fellas were foreclosure attorneys. You're representing some 3,000 families in open cases on foreclosure. And in the process of this, you discovered that these robo-signers existed. Tell us how that happened, Peter.
Okay, just the correction. We're mortgage foreclosure defense lawyers, not mortgage foreclosure lawyers.
Meaning that you're representing, that's what I meant by that. You're representing people rather than the banks.
Exactly.
Correct?
Well, yes, exactly. And what happened was, in the process of this explosion of cases, we noticed that there were certain people that were signing affidavits more often than others. In the past, generally, nobody ever questions the deposition, the affidavits of a bank. They basically have records custodians that are in charge of all of their files and records. So nobody was taking these depositions. Plus, the fact is that the banks made it expensive. In our offices that we have in South Florida, in our offices that we have in South Florida, the people that were signing and sending in the affidavits were from Oregon, Sacramento, Pittsburgh, New York.
Meanwhile, your clients were from where?
Our clients are in most of them are in South Florida.
Is that unusual?
So in order for them, well, not unusual in the way it's done today, but ordinarily, if somebody's going to examine the records of a bank in regard to a mortgage, you would think that it would be close to home.
Well, Peter, I can see how this kind of set you on edge, and you thought, wow, this is kind of strange. What did you find when you looked further? What did you find out about the backgrounds of these people who were doing this kind of work? Did they have any legal background? Did they know anything about the process of making a mortgage or foreclosing on a home or any of the legal niceties?
No. They wanted to hire people that were basically unsophisticated in this way. Usually people that didn't have very much of any secondary education. People who would go along with what they're basically being told. When you take someone who's, out of the military or someone who's had some other kind of lower level job, not that there's anything wrong with that, not that these people are stupid or anything like that, but the fact of the matter is if you want to have somebody who's going to say, hey, I'm hired by a bank, I work for, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whatever, they're going to accept what's being told to them. You sit here, you look at the computer screen, and you sign document after document after document all day, thinking that they're doing things that are legitimate because it's inconceivable otherwise.
Josh, I want to turn to you now. You were actually nice enough to share some of these depositions with us. We saw some of the answers to your questions. It was kind of shocking to me, frankly. Let me read you one from a fellow named John, or this is a robo-signer from Wells Fargo, pardon me. He was asked, now you go through one by one and sign each of these documents, right? And the guy says, yes, sir. When you sign these documents, what do you do? What do you look at on the documents? He says, make sure my information is there and correct, and I sign. When you say your information, the guy says, my name and my title. Anything else? That's it. So some of these folks, apparently, all they felt it was their job to do was to sign the documents. Period. Full stop. Yeah. Do you think these people, there's a lot of people pointing fingers out there. Are the robo-signers at fault or are the banks at fault for not doing the due diligence they should have?
Well, the depositions I've taken, and I think the deposition we're referring to, I think that affidavit was actually a woman, just to be very clear. But what I found is that it really wasn't most of the time the people that were signing these affidavits that had any complicity. If anything, like Peter indicated, these were generally people that were hired specifically not to question authority. And every once in a while we would take a deposition of someone that had some kind of a legal background, but that was the rare situation. Most of the time we had people that were just hired by the banks, and it was really quite shocking. Being in the legal industry, we would make the presumption that a paralegal would be doing this, perhaps someone that was familiar with how mortgages are originated or serviced or dealt with. But most of the time, were just people that had minimal background, and I think that was purposely set up that way.
Peter, to you, a lot of people here at Fox are asking me, well, of their clients, how many folks were actually making payments on their mortgage? Was there anybody there in your group of people that you're representing who were up to date and current on their payments?
No, I don't think so. I think they were basically in foreclosure. Most of them were, basically, well, I know there's different ways of looking at these situations, but basically they were victims of this entire boom that had occurred.
Right.
And I mean, there was the boom period, and then there was the doom period that followed.
Yeah, I think we're all familiar with that one, Peter. Let me, Josh, to you, read you a quote from Richard Blumenthal, a Connecticut Attorney General, who's been pretty outspoken about this. He said, "Our powerful multi-state investigation will hold big banks accountable, determining how and why they broke the law. At the best, banks engaged in careless negligence. At worst, fraud. No consumer should lose their house through big finance fraud." Is this fraud in your view? Do you believe the banks set out to rip people off?
Yes, and I believe maybe not at the inception of these transactions, but at a minimum, through the way that they've been processing and facilitating the foreclosures, it's nothing short of a fraud. And I agree with the Attorney General's statement there regarding what it is at minimum, what it is at best. And, this is a situation where now there's been assertions or positions taken that there's a faulty document. And it's not a document that's faulty, it's the system that was created that's flawed. It's the flawed people, not a flawed document.
And to that point, Peter, to you, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Should somebody go to jail? Should the robo-signers go to jail? Should bank executives go to jail? Who should pay the price?
I think that it's as unlikely for the top peoples in these servicers and these banks to not have known it as it would be for the president of Good Humor Ice Cream not to know they need refrigeration to keep their ice cream cold. It's not as though they had a good, honest system of doing these documents and they had a couple of rogue people or employees that did it differently. If that were the case, then maybe they wouldn't have known about it. But this was the only system that they had. You have to understand, of the 150 or so deposition transcripts that we have, they don't prove that there's a document problem here and a document problem there. They show that it was a pervasive problem that dealt with all of these affidavits. These aren't exceptions. Josh, these are the rule.
I'm sorry to cut you off there. We've really got to go. Thanks for your help today, and thanks for your information.
It's really our pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us on.